Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Today, Matt Poepsel, the VP and Godfather of Talent Optimization at the Predictive Index, as well as Professor of Business Studies at Boston College, has joined us today. He has lots of expertise, lots of experience thinking through how businesses operate and how to bring people along. There's a lot we can get into, but I wanted to start with just like I told him, it smacked me in the forehead. He teaches a class called Business Spirituality, which just resonates with me. I have no idea what he teaches, but I would be the first in line to take it. It sounds perfect. Matt, thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio. Talk to me, business spirituality. What is that?
Yeah, Josh, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Yeah, business spirituality, when you think about an organization, any organization, you really start off a lot of our time we spend thinking about the technical bits. We think about strategy and operations tactics, and we need to do those things. We got to make sure we run a fundamental business, of course. But then a lot of times we move on, we think about the relational bits. What about our people? Got to make sure that we have good, healthy working relationships, that people are engaged, that we have, strong culture and these sorts of things. Well, something has changed in the workforce too, where now we're starting to have people show up and say, yeah, but I want my work to be meaningful. I want to have purpose. I want to feel a sense of belonging. Or I have these other questions that I used to go to church, or I used to have my family right next door. Now they live halfway across the country. I used to have community ties, but now I don't really have those community ties, but I still have these questions. I always go to work. Like, when are we going to talk about some of this stuff too? Post-pandemic, Gen Z workers, et cetera. So we find that when you start to leave the boundaries of just the organization's technical work and even the relationships with people doing that work, and you start to ask those bigger questions, that's what's starting to show up inside of our organizations, and employers aren't necessarily ready to deal with it just yet.
Matt, it's not my job, some executives might say, right? Like, go find that meaning somewhere else. I understand that, nobody's bowling alone, right? Like, there's all this, and there's a decline of religion, maybe not a decline of, well, I know, not a decline of spirituality. I'm even seeing executives pushing back on some of those mental health initiatives or benefits that we saw kind of emerge at the end of the pandemic, and even this pullback on DEI and all of these things. And you're telling me, no, we actually need to invest even further. Why? I mean, I don't have the money for that. I don't have the time for that. Why do I need to be investing in that?
I think always investing in our employees' needs makes good business sense. The
Okay.
reality, if we want to have the highest possible levels of performance and productivity, we need to make sure that employees are getting the experience that they want to have at work, because top talent always has a choice, Josh. You know this. And so when you think about it as an organization, what is it that you have to do business the way business is being done? And so, for example, when workers show up and they say, we want to have this type of access to mental wellness or physical wellness or whatever it might be, then we have to listen, because ultimately, if we're not in a position to get those needs met, as soon as the job market opens up, or when they have that discretionary effort and they're like, do I really feel like leaning into that place where I currently work? They're going to make the choice that we necessarily don't want them to make.
Yeah.
So I feel like because everything has changed, it's time for us to change too.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, I was obviously role playing before. I agree. I think, and you nailed it with that term, the discretionary effort, right? Engagement is any effort given above the bare minimum beneath which you'd be fired, right? So if you are feeling a positive, if you're have a positive inclination towards your business, you're feeling grateful, or you're saying, hey, this is providing me the kinds of things that I need, then you're more likely to not only stay longer, not pick up the phone when the headhunter calls, but also do more productive work. So that's what I've observed as the benefit. Can you give me the like practical, when we're talking about business spirituality, and we're not talking about religion per se, are we? Like, well, give me
Correct.
give me a little, let's go a little further into that. What is that?
Yeah, for some people, they're one and the same. If they have a strong religious bent and they're very comfortable with that, and that is an external way that they're really structuring their spiritual pursuit, that's fine. As you mentioned, certainly in the United States, religiosity has been on the decline since the 90s at least. And when you think about spirituality today, it's really just when it comes to a sincerely held belief in something bigger than oneself, when you start thinking about nature of connection and benevolence and these sorts of things, and mindfulness falls into this today. It's very much an individualized kind of experience, but we know it's an
Mm,
inner experience. And so when we think about spirituality, it's much more broad than traditional definitions or mindsets people have had about strict organized religion. Today, what we're finding is people are coming into the workplace, for example, and wanting to have transparency and to talk to one another about their beliefs, or to really experience and feel connection to their coworkers, to their jobs, to the nature of the meaning of what the company is that they want to work for, or
hmm.
the way that the company contributes to outside of its own single agenda of its own profit. How are we making the community better? What are we doing for sustainability? All these types of stakeholder capitalism movements are really towards trying to continue to expand the contribution that workers can have in a world that, the pandemic showed us was, more finite than perhaps we had stopped to think about before.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to think about it that way. Have you gotten pushback? I mean, there's been some. I did. There was that report, the stakeholder capitalism report that I think Harvard Business Review did. And I was like, yes, finally. But now it's like I think they did a follow up and it didn't quite pan out or something. I don't remember exactly what that was. Tell me about the pushback that you're getting. I'm sure you're feeling that too. What are people saying, and then how do you rebut that?
Yeah, I think in a time when we're experiencing economic headwinds, it pushes us understandably backward. So when you start focusing on, we're just trying to keep the doors open, you don't really
Yeah.
have a lot of extra capacity to talk about employee engagement, employee wellness, certainly not business spirituality. And so what we find is that when we start overlooking the connection between all these things, right? When you have these unprecedented levels of burnout like we have right now, how
Mm-hmm.
is that helping productivity? The answer is it's not. And when you see situations like the Surgeon General talking about the challenges for working parents, for example,
Yeah.
and encouraging mental health screenings because of what they're going through, the human response is to understand that and offer flexibility where you can. And those parents in this example will remember an employer's willingness to give them flexibility when the markets do open up, when it is time and they have a little bit more capacity perhaps to put in that discretionary effort. Employee commitment goes up, employee performance goes up. So I think when we are myopically focused on survival mode, then it takes us back to this very transactional approach to work. But that's not the sum total of what's possible for the human species to really do
Yeah.
work that is meaningful, purposeful, and
Yeah.
can have a much bigger contribution.
Yeah. So we need to take a more holistic view. Leaders need to have a more holistic view. I almost wonder if it's a false choice. Economic headwinds, we need to dial back on connection. It to me, the kind of mandate of economic headwinds, we need to cut jobs, we need to work longer hours. I, I, my hunch is that you aren't going to see the kinds of benefits ultimately, the kind of maybe even medium term benefits. I know we're in a short term crunch in this scenario, but that's my hunch. Is like it's not like, hey, okay, we have to bring mental health, wellness benefit online at this point. Although that's great. Is there an opportunity for there to be the managers just to kind of take a step back and ask some more meaningful questions, or like what are ways? Maybe my question is, what are free but effective ways that organizations are able to invest in their people and their relationships and this spirituality in tight times?
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. There are free and easy things that we can do. One is just taking an active interest in people's values, understanding what's important to them, having the human conversations. Can we just start there? So many times we see managers that are all focused on the business. They don't quite know
Hmm.
how to have the conversation, any human conversation, and making room for vulnerability and connection,
Hmm.
and really attending to the relationship side of things, practicing that sort of servant leadership or stewardship. These things are a step in the right direction. There are many organizations that have chosen to create, for example, transparency through like interfaith employee resource groups. So these aren't religious groups. They're just anybody who comes in and wants to talk and have a conversation, learn about one another's approaches in a respectful way, a way that to create sort of connection and bonds within the organization. Perfectly fine. Other organizations may choose to offer time off to go, volunteer for something that's important to you in that way. There's an entire range of different opportunities and options that employers have when it comes to acknowledging that you're a whole person when you show up to work. And for us to pretend like that's not the case
Yeah.
is not really appropriate. The other thing I'd say is I consider wellness to be very holistic in the sense that we have physical wellness, mental
Yep.
wellness, even
Yep.
financial wellness,
Yep.
and certainly spiritual wellness as well, even if we don't talk about it quite as much. And we don't expect an employer to be prescribing medication. That would be inappropriate. But we do offer ergonomic desk setup, right? Or what about some level of mental wellness when it comes to paid time off or being able to have some time to step away? Financial wellness, we might have a 401k plan, for example. We're always playing a supporting role when it comes to wellness. I don't think spirituality needs to be any different. I think it just needs to be a place where you can come and recognize that we are whole people when we show up to work. And while this is a very individual thing, there is a supporting role that employers can make to recognize that we have these needs and have the ability to talk about them, especially when post-pandemic workers, Gen Z, coming in and saying there's got to be more to life than work. And people like myself and Gen X are like, what? What are you talking about? Of course, that's all there is to it. Everything has changed. And for us to pretend like we can go backward in time and really kind of lord
Yeah.
over our powers of
Yeah.
trying to be very fixated on the bottom line and the technical machinery of business is going to lead us astray.
We're not employees are not, the original, Ford motor vehicle, right? Like horseless carriage, right? We're not
Correct.
we're that I mean that is where modern business started, right? Modern management, business management started was with the assembly line. And I fear that we are still trained and stuck in that command and control efficiency mindset. And that's just not how humans operate.
I also think it's not a story that gets a lot of press, if you will, when we start talking about these more advanced bits. Well, one example is the bank Truist, very large bank,
Yeah.
talks very openly to even candidates, much less to employees, about helping them find purpose in their work and in their leadership. That's just a very small example of being able to recognize that. Another example of Ten Tree, which is a company that produces apparel for like hats and jackets. And they say every time someone buys one of our products, we plant 10 trees. Well, they've planted 150 million trees on their goal towards a billion trees by 2030.
Hmm.
And so if you're into ecology in their example, you think you're not going to want to show up and give your all when what the company does is so aligned with your personal values.
Hmm.
It's like these things are important in a way that they didn't used to be, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be.
All right. What about? I feel like the amazing comedic series Silicon Valley did send up of this whole treatise on a higher purpose, and where every single one, there was one episode where they were doing some sort of hackathon or presenting stuff, and every one of the startups were like, we're making the world a better place, we're making the world a better place. And I felt that so deeply when I saw that, and I was like, that's totally what I've been advocating. What I mean, it's like these companies that are, I don't know. I mean, they're not all doing 10 trees. They're not all Patagonia. I mean, does every organization need to have that higher purpose?
Not at all. Not at all. But I think the way we approach our business, we all have an opportunity. Let's take a very common example. every town has a dry cleaner. If you're a
Yep.
dry cleaner, you're like, hey, people have a service. They want clean clothes.
That's
Great.
it.
Love it.
Yep.
Well, you may not feel like you're changing the world, but the chance to contribute in your community to help people to, perhaps maybe you're cleaning a suit and somebody's going to go get a job and so they can finally,
Hmm.
have the type of life and provide for the family the way they want. Whatever that meaning and purpose is. The other thing is we have to run fundamental businesses. I think we always treat this as if it's binary, and it's not.
Mm.
Like, no one's saying we need to go bankrupt trying to help people find their purpose. We have to run a fundamental business. Otherwise, we're a drain on society. We can't have
Yep.
that.
Yep.
We also have to run a relational business and make sure that people aren't, treating one another poorly at work. We don't want to have overbearing managers just to get to that, profit contribution, for example. We would see that as not sustainable in the long run. So why stop there? Why not have this opportunity to think broader about, we send our employees home to their families who we never meet. We send them into the community. When we start to recognize that they have these interests and curiosities and needs beyond our four walls, why pretend like they don't? And so it's just an expansion of ways of thinking and trying to create opportunities for employees to explore. That's all we're talking about, is how do we explore what's meaningful and relevant? Whether it's anything from mindfulness practice to try to offset some of the stress response, whether it's connecting with other like-minded people who are my coworkers, whether it's chances to volunteer inside of, use some small amount of work time to be able to have an employer who says it's important that, we support you with whatever you're into. Like, these are all,
Mm.
significant investments that are going to make everything work better. It is a false choice, as you said a little bit earlier, saying,
Yeah.
well, if I want to have a profitable business, I have to treat people badly and pretend like they don't have a life, or these burning questions, bigger
Amazon.
than my organization.
Amazon. Amazon.
There's so many. And I think, again, when you start to see some of this, the employment market, the job market tightening up, you're going to see more employers try to wrestle back that power. Well, that's exactly the opposite of what we'd want employees to do. And I know
Yeah.
that some did when
Yeah.
it comes to being a seller's market, so to speak. But both of those views fly in the face of a more, mindful, connected approach that says, how can we all work together in partnership, in a form of unity to make sure that we build the businesses we want, have the relationships we want, and have the opportunities to explore these things, these concepts that
Hmm.
used to be completely treated outside of work, but now are making their way into work.
I you have, I think, a unique perspective. You're teaching sort of the next generation. You also, as part of Predictive Index, are seeing a lot of companies investing in different things. And I wonder if you had some insights around where the talent market is going. What are we? My sense, and anybody who's listened to even one of my episodes knows that I'm pretty passionate about this evolution of business, and I feel like we're in a sort of unrecognized kind of revolution in how organizations need to be doing business. So it's something that I'm personally passionate about, and I'm always super curious about folks that are out there doing the work. What are you seeing? What do you anticipate is going to happen in the next 5-10 years when it comes to talent?
Yeah, everyone seems to be absorbing a lot of change. And I think there was this notion that we would have this, whatever a new normal might be, relatively quickly after
Yep.
2020.
Snap back.
Snap back, yeah, more like slap back at this point. Like we're slapped into the reality that it's not coming.
No.
Yeah, so I think that right now what we're seeing is we're still absorbing change. We've had everything from teams that got restructured to the economic headwinds, all these other types of things we've been talking about, and it's caused this fatigue, I think, inside
Oh
of
my
the work.
gosh. Fatigue and burnout.
Absolutely,
We
absolutely.
have
But at
not
the
come
same
back from
time,
it.
and it's dangerous because we have to continue to evolve. We can't go backwards. We can't say, well, everybody has to return to office. And all of a sudden, if that's the right choice for someone to elect to return to office, that's one thing. But to force people back, in a time when everybody's pretty depleted right now, that's pretty challenging. When I
Yeah.
looked ahead to the next 5 years, I'm doing some research now, and the Predictive Index is also working on a big project called Talent 2030, which is all about what is the future of the workforce going to look like in just 5 years. I mean, 2025 is right around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you think about 5 years, More change. That much we know. There's going to be a continual shift in both the labor market, because Gen Z is one of the smallest generations we've had recently. So there's just not enough people to go around for certain technical jobs over the next 5 years. There could be as many as 80 million jobs, according to Korn Ferry, that could be unfilled,
Oh,
especially for
wow.
certain skilled labor positions.
Oh, I hadn't heard that data point yet.
Oh man,
So Gen Z is small, huh?
it's a smaller generation. And so when you start looking at and many are
Huh.
staying out of the workforce because there's a lot of different alternatives to traditional work in many cases too. So
Yes.
employers are going to continue to struggle, I think, especially in certain industries and for certain roles. When you also look at the rise of technology, everything's becoming, AI-ified, if you will.
Yeah.
And how we actually make peace with all that and how we find a new level of productivity remains to be seen. But we know there's going to be a continued integration of technology into, the way that we do our work, for example. And then another big one is multi-generational work. Who can afford right now, when we have almost an indefinite lifespan and healthcare costs are so expensive, who can afford to retire at 65 and live
Huh.
for decades? So
Yeah.
people are staying in. I call it the baby boomers. I call them baby boomerangs, because a lot of them left the workforce but come back because they're like, I need at least part-time work.
Something.
I can't just live on a fixed income alone. And at the same time, by 2030, Generation Alpha will be 11% of the workforce. So, when you start thinking about having 5 generations in the workforce, and let's say you're a millennial right in the middle, and you're like, how do I manage my team when I've got boomers and Gen Xers who are part-time? I've got Gen Alpha coming in and they're very different than I was. Half of us are remote, some of us are here. We don't have management models for these things. And so I think that it's really going to continue to be an evolution. And I think if we approach it with an open mind, then we can be flexible and we can be dynamic and we won't be brittle. But if we
Hmm.
try to pretend like the old systems, the Henry Ford systems you were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
we're even working today, it's just not the case.
Yeah. My response to that forced back to the office. I mean, what I realized, so there's been a number of news pieces about organizations, and I think brittle is the right way to put it, where they're going backwards and they're saying you have to come back to the office 5 days a week. My feeling is that they're allowing the where to dictate the how. And in fact, we need to be allowing the how to dictate the where. So it's harder. It's easier to go, look, it worked when we were all in the office. We were so much more innovative and productive and closer. Sure, it's true. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an alternative. And I'm going to beat the drum about we need to be rethinking how we work because people are overwhelmed, fatigued. There's too many meetings, and I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen a new model, and like you said, I think we're not there yet. We were all predicting, oh, all right, we'll come back. 18 months, we're resilient. We're coming back, but I don't think we're any better, and I think we need to be better. There's too much to do and not enough people to do it, and we need to rethink how work is happening.
Yeah, and I think when you think about the models and the evolution, we're doing so much more knowledge work has given way to this highly collaborative work and these ecosystems of work. And all that means is that when we open things up and we create multiple ways of connection and we create a lot of diversity in how things get done, that's the most dynamic and flexible systems that we have.
Yeah.
When we try to make things regimented and brittle and hierarchical, things break down. So I think this is the other last point I make on that one too, is that a decision to return to office, for example, doesn't land on everyone equally. Some people might, be caring for an elderly parent at the same time they're caring for young kids. They may have a 45-minute commute
Yep.
versus a 4-minute commuter.
Yep.
So it's just these blanket sort of policies. I understand where they're coming from. We want to be, in the office, rubbing elbows, being able to innovate the way that we used to. But I'm with you. I don't think, Josh, that focusing on the where is let's focus on the who, in addition to the how.
Okay, good. All right, you're taking
recognize
it to the next level. That's good.
it's a very individualized response.
Oh.
Some people are. It's just not going to land on everyone equally, and I think we just have to recognize that.
All right, that was great. You're hitting us with lots of really interesting insights. Final thoughts, words, piece of advice for a manager who doesn't have budget but wants to provide a little more value for their team. What
Yeah,
would you advise?
when we think about the people part, like when you think about the engine that your organization is, when you're trying to create value, you're trying to create competitive differentiation, you're trying to put up performance, it's always going to come down to your people because no competitor has access to resources you can't get, technology you won't have, even if you don't have it yet. All that other stuff eventually falls away. But whoever can do the most with their people and through their people, those are the long-term winners. So that just means to this manager, you've got to get the people part right. That means you have to invest yourself in your craft of leadership and learn how to get the people part right, not just be a technical manager, but be a people leader. But then also when you're making your business case, always tie your people investments to your business investments. If you have some metrics that are off or you have a new project that's really critical, then really couch them in that context. This whole notion that things are separate when in fact they're connected is devastating. We think, well, I can just order people back to work, or I'm just going to cut investment in certain people programs as if that preserves the bottom line. It actually destroys the bottom line because as soon as there's daylight in this job market, people have long memories and they're just not going to stick around to work for somebody they think is a bad actor, even though right now they have to. So it future proofs your business if you really take that people perspective.
I don't think I've violently agreed with someone so much. I tried to push back and create some tension, but holy moly, you're saying everything that I believe even more articulately. Matt Poepsel, he is the vice president and godfather of talent optimization at Predictive Index. He is also professor at the Boston College graduate program in business spirituality, among other things. Matt, thank you so much. Is there some place that folks could find you if they want to connect, ask more, or follow up on some of your work?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a fabulous place. I'm always on LinkedIn. Very easy to find with that wild last name of mine. Also, mattpoepsel.com.
All right, perfect. So Poepsel, Poepsel, if you're interested. Thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Thank you, Josh.